is Parvin Dabas and welcome to the MMA India Show. We're reviewing UFC 204 and we have a special guest with us today, Ratish Menon from the Fan Garage. Welcome, Ratish.
Thanks for having me, Parvin. It's an honor and pleasure to be on the show. I'm a huge fan of this.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being on the show for the very first time. We hope it's not the last. We shall keep having you on.
I hope so too.
On to review the fight. So, a lot of really great fights today, really anticipated by the fans. We shall be talking about the co-main event and the main event right now with Ratish. So starting off, let's get into it immediately. Mousasi versus Belfort. Of course, Mousasi was coming off 2 wins. Belfort was coming off a loss. In the last 3 fights, Belfort had 2 losses and 1 win. The only win against Dan Henderson. Now, one thing I want to speak about right up front is, personally, my opinion is a lot of the Brazilians, especially guys like Belfort, who are on TRT, so-called medication, have all of a sudden become different and diminished fighters. And their runs have suddenly started converting into losses, and they look very different also. Do you think it does have a lot to do with going off the TRT medication, or do you think it's just loss of form?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, definitely with Vitor, the difference is the most pronounced.
Yeah.
Both physically, and I feel one of the things that that's really come about in his past couple of losses is the fact that I think he's. He was always somebody who. Had the early flurry. If the fight went beyond the initial rounds, he has never won a fight which has gone the distance.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of his fights have actually gone the distance to begin with. But then I think with the one thing, everybody talks about the physical change that has come about since the time, he's gone off TRT. But then I think one of the biggest changes I have noticed is that, his mentally he's also not the same.
I was just going to mention that. Do you think sometimes it's almost like a placebo? It's like taking it gives you that mental edge, knowing that you got this thing in your body and you are a lot more confident going in. You almost feel maybe not invincible, but it does give you that mental edge, knowing you have this in your body and you feel stronger.
Absolutely, it has to be. Look no further than Vitor in this case. There were other guys who were on TRT who, despite the ban, have managed to hold on to some level of success. Beat Dan Henderson, beat Frank Mir, people like that. But then Vitor has been somebody who's was the poster boy for TRT.
Yeah.
And in his case, the most telling sign is the fact that, he's a black belt.
Yeah.
He's a black belt under Carlson Gracie, one of the old school, initial black belt. I think he got his black belt when he was in his teens.
Yeah.
For somebody like him to give up mount so easily in his last 3 losses in the first round is a huge telltale sign as to how much he was reliant on the TRT and how much of an impact it has had on a mental level, apart from the obviously physical level.
Yeah.
So that's a definitely telling sign. But then, I would imagine that I thought that this performance was better than his last loss, wherein he couldn't get going at all. In this fight, like the Weidman fight, he did have his moments.
The loss to Souza, you mean?
Yeah, lost to Jacare. Yeah, lost to Jacare. Yeah. So, just like the Weidman fight, the loss before that, he had his moments in the first round against Mousasi as well, and I thought he looked good. But the moment that the fight went on the second round and Mousasi took him down once, you can see. I don't want to say he's a legend, but then he has some quit in him. So the moment you take him down and the ease with which Mousasi got the mount, it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, and like we said, a lot of it is mental. I think coming to the fight, I think Mousasi played a really good technical fight in both rounds, especially in the beginning, keeping his distance, knowing how dangerous Belfort can be in the pocket. Even without TRT, but once he gets in the pocket, he has that, like we saw against Weidman. He does have the capacity to still come out with that flurry.
Yep.
So Mousasi really smartly maintained his distance. He judged distance really well, kept getting his jabs. He started off with kicks. And, and you could see Belfort never really got going. I think he got a couple of combinations in, but he never really got going at any point of the time in the match.
Yeah. In the first round, he had his moments. He landed a few kicks and he landed a good straight left, which got Mousasi to back up a bit.
Yeah.
But then Musasi wagged his finger and said that no more. And which was the story in the fight after that. But, Musasi, I love this new Musasi. I mean, I think after his loss to Uriah Hall last year, he's kind of taken this cautious approach. I mean, he got booed in his fight against Lightis, but then it was such a one-sided fight.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite guys in the division. He's one of the most well-rounded guys, extremely technical. And, at 31 years old, the guy's a veteran in the sport. He's close to about 40, 50 fights. And, and his chin is held up. Yeah. There is no wear and tear. And I really like this new Musasi, who's very calculated. And he's a killer. He's an assassin. The moment he sees an opening, he just kind of swarms and capitalizes.
And what's really interesting also, just as an aside, is how different he is outside the ring and inside. He seems like so calm and hardly like a fighter. He almost seems like a professor. And maybe that should be his nickname. The professor. He even if you see him in the embedded series, he's such a chill, laid back kind of guy. But the minute he comes into the ring, you see his mind. He's such a smart fighter as well, working and judging each and every little move.
He's very ice cold, very calculative, and there was a phase when he came into the UFC where he was trying to kind of put on a show, and he had a couple of losses because of it.
Yeah.
So I love this new Musasi, and technically he's second to none, and especially that jab. If you just saw the jab, there's very little wind up, and it's very stinging. And like you said, it helped him keep range against some.
Like we saw, he knows when to back off a bit also.
Absolutely.
Because Belfort is especially very good against the incoming fighter.
Yeah.
So he knew, he would punch and always maintain his distance. He would just, he wasn't, like we said, getting into that pocket or standing and engaging too much.
Absolutely. This was a great win, and more importantly, a great performance from his end. I mean, even his kicks and all very sharp. He's that classic Dutch kickboxer.
Yeah.
With great boxing skills. At the same time, he's not one of those hulking powerhouse move forward types.
Yeah.
So it's great. I mean, very impressed, and good call out as well. I mean, Dan Hardy kind of predicted that he will call out Anderson Silva after that, and he did.
I'm personally not very impressed. Now, just coming to the end, what I was really always very impressed with how he swarms. He swarmed Belfort once he saw that opening. He, after the head kick, he saw that opening. He just never let up. He swarmed Belfort and he finished it off. So he just didn't let off at all. And that, I think, was amazing to see Musasi do that. Now, coming to Anderson, calling out Anderson Silva, personally, I'm not such a big fan of, Michael Bisping calling out Dan Henderson to get back that wing, of course, and Musasi now calling out Anderson Silva, because these guys are past their prime. Let's be frank. Of course, it's a very big moral boosting win that you fight Anderson Silva. It's always like a dream come true that you fight the Anderson Silva, but he's not the Anderson Silva anymore.
I have kind of mixed emotions on that, because I think Vitor Belfort and the Anderson Silva fights is something that Musasi has been kind of campaigning for a while, because Musasi has also been fighting for a while.
Yeah.
So these fights is something should have happened long while back. And Anderson Silva, despite not being the Anderson Silva like you mentioned, he's still ranked above Musasi. So probably he just wants to kind of gain that kind of a notoriety, because he doesn't have the personality to kind of gain the notoriety. So he wants to kind of build his name up a bit by on the back of these legends. So maybe that could be a reason for these guys.
I think it's more that, and we all know how these ranking works. I don't think many people give credits to it, because like we just saw, the Michael Bisping fight Dan Henderson, who's ranked much below him. So, I think it was that thing of fighting Anderson Silva. And, of course, these fights have been in the making, but there was a time for these fights, a couple of years back. So that's my whole point, is the time for those fights is gone now. Now Anderson Silva seems to be more of a exhibition fighter almost, if I say that, because let me be very clear, I'm a big fan of his. I've been following him for very long, and he's one of the reasons seeing him, I stuck to watching UFC and MMA. So it gives me no greater joy than watching him fight. But my problem is with these guys calling him out. That is my problem. Calling him out They should be, I feel, calling out, other guys, because we've seen a diminished Anderson Silva. Of course, he can still come back. Let's be clear, Dan Henderson was fighting till 46. He can still make a comeback. But my whole thing is these guys calling him out. I think a Musasi, after 3 wins in a row, should be calling out for guys who are even perceived to be a little bit more of the present competition, rather than just like a big name fight.
Sure. I mean, Parvin, I totally get it. I mean, and this is where I like Musasi in the sense that he's very objective about his skills. I mean, he did mention the fact that the guys ranked above him, apart from Anderson Silva, are all booked for fights, and he also accepted the fact that despite having 3 wins in a row, I don't think if I even ask for a title shot, I will get one, because it will be probably among the winners of the Weidman, Romero, and the Jacare fights.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, he wants to kind of build, like I said, build his name up, so that following an impressive performance against somebody like an Anderson Silva, he can maybe campaign for a title shot. And also, I mean,
like Bisping. That's how Bisping got his title shot, even if it was through last minute replacement. But it was because he had defeated Anderson Silva. Though my view of that win is, of course, mixed, just like today's, which we'll get to soon enough. So, yeah, I agree. You defeated Anderson Silva and you immediately jump the line as somebody who's defeated Anderson Silva. But, of course, we all have mixed opinions on that. Getting to the main fight now. Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. Really anticipated, of course, the way it came about also. After Michael Bisping knocked out Luke Rockhold, which shook everybody and which totally screwed up the middleweight division, like a lot of people have mentioned, because fighters, I would say, a lot of the fighters are very open about their, I don't know if hate is too strong a word, for Michael Bisping, they just don't like the guy, and they felt that Luke Rockhold, he lost it more than, of course. Michael Bisping played a really tactical fight. He saw that Luke used to drop his hand and the left hook would be the weapon that would, KO him, and it worked, So it wasn't just a fluke. They planned it, they strategized it, and they won. But it was still Luke Rockhold, of course, who lost again. There will be a lot of differing opinions. Michael Bisping won, became the champ. A lot of people were like, what the fuck? They just suddenly, and he called out Dan Henderson, who he had been brutally KO'd by 9 years ago in UFC 100. I think we've seen that replayed a number of times. Dan Henderson always says people still come and thank him for that. He knocked him out and then followed it up with a huge elbow, which Michael Bisping still holds against him because he felt he was already knocked out and he followed it up. Dan Henderson, of course, says it felt good. So there was a lot of acrimony, of course, and Michael Bisping wanted to erase that from the show reels because that was on every highlight show reel. And he called out Dan Henderson, totally cutting the line, and of course Dan Henderson just coming off that amazing win of Hector Lombard. People had started calling for Dan Henderson to retire, after losses against Musasi and Belfort.
Belfort, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, but he came up against that win against Hector Lombard, and Lombard was a rising contender, so to speak, and he nipped that in the bud with an amazing, I think it was a side elbow, a reverse elbow, as Lombard was coming up and knocked him out. He, of course, now this fight was like a huge revenge match. Sorry, we've just got a technical problem. Hold on for a second as Ratish is logging back in. Okay, we will come back to you in just a second after reconnecting with Ratish. Hold on. And you're back with the MMA India Show after that small little technical glitch, and Ratish is back with us. Welcome back, Ratish.
Thanks.
And like we were talking about Dan Henderson just having defeated Hector Lombard and coming back into contention again after a lot of people were saying he should retire, and Michael Bisping calling out Dan Henderson, causing a lot of resentment amongst the top 5-6 UFC middleweight fighters who were in line for a rematch, especially Luke Rockhold, who immediately wanted a rematch, and Chris Weidman and Jacare, all of them. Of course, they're all fighting each other now to be the #1 contender. And this was, Dan Henderson had also publicly stated that win or lose, this was going to be his last fight, which meant that if he won and became the middleweight champion, he was immediately going to vacate the belt anyway. So because of that, a lot of anticipation around this fight, and it lived up to it to a large extent.
Absolutely. I mean, I for one, I didn't have a problem with the fight at all. I mean, because the way Henderson performed against Lombard, and especially knocking him out and finishing him like that, which nobody had done up till that point. And also Henderson, because there's such a good story. I mean, this was Bisping's first knockout, which Henderson handed it to him at UFC 100, and just the manner in which they did it. And like you mentioned, it's a part of every highlight show reel there is, and so there is a story there. And also, one interesting point that came out of the fight for me was the fact that how Bisping brought it up. I mean, how big the mental game is.
Yeah.
He spoke about the jitters.
Yeah.
He spoke about the fact that he ended up doing all the things that he was planning not to do, and that's the reason why he got tagged, as we would discuss later in the fight. But then it was such an interesting story heading into the fight, and I for one particularly didn't have a problem with Henderson kind of jumping the line.
Yeah.
And
I mean, neither did I, but I think a lot of fighters did though.
Yeah, fighters. I mean, but then they didn't really come out. I mean, they were more attacking, more like Bisping, and I thought it was a little unfair because Bisping didn't really call out Henderson. It was UFC who put the fight together. He just said yes because he kind of wanted revenge definitely, and people were kind of accusing him of kind of going for an easy fight, which we all got to see today.
It wasn't
the case at all.
Yeah. Anything but.
Anything but.
And what's surprising is, what's really surprising, of course, about fighting Dan Henderson is what he's going to do.
Yeah.
you know he's gonna line up that big right hand, but you have no choice but to engage him, right? And somewhere or the other, it's like in the moment. You have to be wary. You're strategizing. You're making your strategy. But at the end of the day, that right hand is going to be there. It's always going to be into play, and you never know when it's going to strike. Like we saw today in both the first and second rounds, Michael Bisping got knocked down by it, but survived. Surprisingly, especially the first time he got knocked down, he followed it up with a huge elbow again, but he missed the elbow. And I think that's why Michael Bisping survived. He managed to get his head out of the way just in time because he didn't, the punch didn't knock him out. He still had his wits about him.
True. And a lot of the credit kind of goes to Jason Perillo as well, and improved Bisping's technique as well, because if you see the first fight, he kind of got knocked out when he was kind of leaning out, so that way the shot landed flush. In this way, he had kind of his chin tucked in a little bit, so even though the shot landed flush, it kind of takes a lot away from that blow because he's moving in the direction of the shot. So I think that had a lot to do, and plus I think Bisping is a warrior, and the fact that he undefeated in front of his home crowd, Manchester, and all of that, I think it just brings out the best in him every time. Even with the Anderson Silva fight, after getting knocked down in the end of the third round, he came back in the fourth round like he was the one pressing the action and things like that. So that way Bisping is
I think Dan Anderson had a point when he said, "I wish the judges would judge the match based on how the fighters look at the end of it." This was similar to the Anderson Silva fight in some ways, even though Michael Bisping had his moments against Silva. But against Dan today, I don't think there was any point where you felt Dan Henderson was in danger. He was, of course, he had volume, he had strikes, he was fighting a very technical fight, but he never had Dan Henderson in any danger throughout the fight. And a lot of fighters scored the match, the first, second, and fifth round for Dan Henderson.
Can't disagree with them. I mean, at the same time, it was very clear that Bisping was looking to outpoint, especially third round onwards. I was a little disappointed that Bisping was only looking to outpoint him. He wasn't looking to finish him, and because by then he realized that I'm in danger. I need to kind of start winning this fight.
You can't totally blame him because he had just been knocked out twice. I mean, twice, once in both rounds. Yeah. So he was, started saying, you know what, screw that. I'm not going in. I'm gonna, hit and back. He maintained his distance, and he just played a very strategic fight after that. Yes, disappointing, especially after he said that I'm gonna knock him out in the third round.
Exactly my point.
If you say things like that, you need to follow it up. Especially against, you called him an old man, you said he's podgy, you said all this kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, you're staying away from this old guy, who can knock you the fuck out like he just showed.
Absolutely. And, like I mentioned, it just went on to show that, how Bisping was, so even after all these years, he was so wary of the right hand, he just walked right into it. Not walked right into it, but then he was there. He was there for those right hands, not once, not twice, but multiple times.
Yeah.
And all credit to him, he definitely won the fight. I thought, he outpointed him. But then, like I said, if damage was the criteria, the fight would have been a lot more closer than we thought. And then, again, let's not forget the fact that, the fight is happening in Manchester. And just like the Anderson Silva fight, which was, I thought, a lot closer than today's fight, the judges are always going to give it to Bisping when, it goes down to the wire.
Yeah. Now, of course, now coming down to what could be next for Bisping, I think he called out Weidman today. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He's been saying that because he feels that Weidman will win against Romero, who is publicly called as a drug cheat, and he's already beaten Rockhold. And Jacare, I have a feeling Bisping is trying to lobby for a fight against Weidman because of the trash talk that has been going on Twitter between the two of them.
Also, do you think, I mean, of course, he's the ex-champ, but do you think he actually considers Weidman an easier fight than Rockhold? Because Rockhold is a really solid fighter, and we saw what he did to Weidman.
Sure, but then I don't think, in terms of style matchups, I think Weidman is a worse matchup for Bisping than Rockhold. Weidman being a solid wrestler and the grinder.
Yeah.
Rockhold is somebody who stands with Bisping, and he's a little known for being a little chinny.
Yeah.
Weidman is kind of rock solid everywhere. So I think Weidman is a worse matchup, but then he just wants to kind of show the fact Bisping is a fighting guy. He's kind of never backed out from any challenge, and he's somebody who calls people out.
Yeah.
And so I think he wants to live up to that kind of a reputation at this stage. He wants to kind of bring legitimacy to his reign as a champion,
which he has to now, of course, because I don't think anybody is going to consider him a really legitimate champion against defeating Dan Henderson, and that through decision. I think everybody knew it was a revenge match, but if you really want to be called the champ, you got to beat one of these top 4 guys now.
Yeah, and plus between Weidman and Rockhold, Weidman is a fresher matchup, because Rockhold and Bisping have already fought twice.
Yeah.
So, and Weidman, he can do his part with marketing, with something that Romero and Jacare can't do, because they don't speak the language. So I think that's one reason as well. But this fight kind of showed the fact that Bisping, like a lot of people, it kind of echoed a lot of people's thoughts that Bisping is not going to be a long-term champion, and it's after this fight it's a little hard to disagree. I mean, I do see him kind of having a tough time against the giants in the division, such as the Rockholds and the Jacares and the Weidmans of the world.
Yeah, though I do feel, I mean, whatever we said, I think Michael Bisping is a great fighter.
Absolutely,
and he's got a lot of heart. He's showed that. And he, now that he's got Jason Perillo in his corner, who's an amazing boxing coach, I think the strategy for each and every fighter will be spot on.
I would think so too. I mean, it just would come down to, with Weidman and Jacare, they're a lot bigger than Bisping and a lot younger as well.
Yeah.
So that could work against him, and these guys punch hard as well, something that Bisping doesn't. I mean, he did tag Henderson a few times today, and Henderson, like we've seen in the past couple of fights, while he has he's got a good chin, he doesn't have the same chin that he used to earlier.
Yeah.
So the fact that like you said, there was no damage to be seen on his face despite getting tagged throughout the fight, shows that Bisping kind of lacks that kind of a zing when it comes to punching. I mean, something that he definitely surprised everybody with in the Rockhold fight. But it'll be an interesting time to see as to who he gets matched up against next.
Yeah, and then we've got some really exciting fights coming up. I'm really excited about Rockhold against Souza. I'm really excited about Dos Anjos versus Ferguson. I think that is going to be an amazing fight because Ferguson has been, of course, beating everybody, and now he's up against the ex-champ. I think this will, of course, put him up there as a number one contender. UFC 205, of course, what an amazing card. You know,
amazing.
what I wouldn't pay to be there watching the match. What I wouldn't pay for that.
Absolutely.
Sponsors, are you listening? Any sponsors out there? Okay. But, you know, an amazing card. We've got a slight break now, of course, up till November 5th until the Dos Anjos-Ferguson fight. Mm-hmm. But we've had some really amazing fights in the past and some really great fights coming up now, and we look forward to them. And hopefully we shall have you on again soon, reviewing one of the fights with us.
Thank you, Parvin. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I do look forward to coming back on the show. And I want to plug in the fangarage.com, and I urge all the listeners to check out the website. We do work on all sports.
We have no problems with the competition and giving and being friends with our competition and giving them space.
It's a different space because it's more like a sports website, and
of course, I'm just
take up tons of others.
I'm just kidding.
And like I said, the pleasure and the honor is mine, Parvin. And anytime you want me on the show, please do let me know, and I look forward to chatting to you about more.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us today. Been great talking to you. Thanks. That was
same here.
Ratish Menon from the Fan Garage. Hang on, we've got someone else, a fan, coming on soon. Cheers. And we're back. This is Parvin Dabas on the MMA India Show, and we are here with Fan Corner and our number one fan, Taman Preet Singh. Welcome back, Taman Preet.
Hi, Parvin.
Hi. Good to have you on the show again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. Always great having the fans on and hearing their opinion on the matches, because at the end of the day, the fights happen for them. And Taman Preet has been, he's not just a fan, but he has a lot of technical knowledge, which we have seen on, since he keeps commenting on our Twitter and Facebook pages. And we hope to have him as a regular commentator someday, especially if he moves maybe someday from Ambala to Mumbai. We can have him on the show.
Sure, Parvin.
So let's get down to the fights. We're going to be reviewing 3 fights. With Taman Preet, we're going to be basically touching upon the first one, which was Bektik versus Russell Doan. Now, Bektik which was a featherweight fight. Bektik was 10-0 before this, and he became 11-0 with this fight. Hasn't really beaten any big name as such, but of course, 11-0 is a great record anyway.
Yes, that's correct. And we should not forget that he is in the top 15 featherweight now ranking. He was supposed to fight Renato Moicano, but Russell Doan was a late, you can say, replacement for him. But still, Russell, I think for the first minute, I think he got him hurt. Bektik was hurt in the first couple of minutes, but then he recovered well.
And of course he controlled his back. He got in the choke and got the tap out. You know, so he was in control all the time. It was just the first, I think, minute or something, a couple of minutes where Russell showed somewhat of a fight, but Bektik soon took control of the fight and got the finish. So he is, of course, he's a really good upcoming fighter. He's an 11-0. Let's see which fight they give him now in the featherweight division. What do you think?
I think Clay Gira would be good fight for Russell Doan. Since Gira is a wrestler, right? And we have seen that this guy, Mr. Bektik, can knock out people. He knocked out Lucas Martins in his last fight. It was TKO, it was a stoppage. Now he has submitted Russell Doan. So we can see that he can knock people out and he has submission skills. And Clay Gira is a wrestler. He is very good on the ground and he has good punching power. So that would be a good matchup. What I think that should be.
Okay, great. Now coming to the second fight of the main card, Steven Struve versus Daniel. I cannot pronounce his second name.
Yeah, he's a Polish fighter. Yeah. I've seen him.
What's his second name? Can you pronounce it for us?
Let me try. It's Omian and
Chuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, let's
yeah.
call him Daniel. So now
Daniel.
coming to Steven, he's overcome. He had a medical condition which he's overcome.
Yeah.
He's come back to fight. He has some wins over some really top guys, including the present champion Miocic.
Right. He knocked out Bigfoot Silva in his
Of
last
course, in his
fight.
last fight, he's coming off of that win. But of course, Bigfoot has been losing a lot since he's come off TRT, and we've already spoken about that on the episode today about some of the Brazilians losing their sheen after coming off of TRT and not being the same fighters. The same with Antonio Silva. So of course, can't give him that much credit. But a win is a win. But like I said, Struve has a win over Miocic. He has wins over a lot of top fighters. He's the tallest fighter in the UFC. He really towers over a lot of guys, and he's very a really skilled fighter. He uses his height to his advantage, though not as much as he should. Now he's coming back after I think a good year and a half almost, right?
Struve, it seems so, but what I think is like his most important thing is his reach. He has the longest reach with the we can compare it with John Jones.
Yeah.
So what we did not see that in the Alistair Overeem fight, but after that he started using it when he started with started his camp with Black Zillions. So right now he's working with Black Zillions. Yeah, and he's coming back and forth back to Netherlands and then sparring in the Black Zillions camp. So with Henry Hooft working with him, he has improved his striking very much. So he was good at ground. Now he is good at striking too.
Yeah. Now Daniel started off the fight really well. He looked very nimble for a heavyweight, and he was closing the distance very well a couple of times. But Steven was in no way in any danger in either round, and in both rounds he got a takedown through the judo trip both times.
Both times. Right. And we should not forget one more thing that Daniel has defeated. You can say a fighter. He was a Polish fighter who had a long winning streak. I cannot pronounce his name. I think he was a Polish fighter, Oliman Ozelnik, something like that.
Okay.
And he had 2-3 wins.
Yeah, he's coming off of 3 wins right now. Correct.
Right. So it was also Daniel was also late replacement for Steven Struve. So I think with a full camp, it would be interesting to see how Steven Struve would compete against this Muay Thai fighter.
Yeah, and even at the end of the first round, we saw he was trying to get in the rear naked choke, but the bell saved Daniel. And of course, in the second round, he immediately took control. He got the takedown. They grappled against the fence then for some time. He got the judo trip again, and he finished him off with the DR choke.
Yeah, he finished him off with a DR choke, and we did not see any skills from Daniel on the ground. It seems that he was just trying to punch him and get him into the clinch work and all that, but there was no resistance kind of thing from Daniel on the ground. So Steven Struve, being a specialist in submission skills, had that advantage on him.
Yeah. Now coming to the third fight on the main card.
Yeah.
Now before that, rewinding a bit, what do you think is next for Steven Struve? He has asked. He didn't call out any particular fighter, but he has said he wants the top competition. And I think he deserves it.
I think Derek the Beast Lewis would be a good fight.
Sorry?
Derek the Beast Lewis. Derek Lewis. Yes, I think because he is now in a top 10. He's a top 10 fighter.
Yeah.
Since he defeated Roy Nelson, Big Country. So
and he was going to fight on the Manila card, which is now cancelled.
Yes. I was looking at it. I think it has been rescheduled. This Derek Lewis fight has been rescheduled to 206. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So if it is not scheduled, then Steven matches with Derek Lewis very much. So it would be interesting to see them fight.
Yeah, I agree. That'll be a good matchup. Now coming to the third fight on the main card, Jimmy Manuwa versus Ovince St. Preux. Now of course, Jimmy Manuwa coming off the loss to Anthony Johnson. His record was 15-2. The only other loss he had was against Alexander Gustafsson.
Yeah,
Two of the top light heavyweights, of course.
Yeah.
And Manoa otherwise was finishing off a lot of fighters. I think all of his wins came by a finish.
Yeah, TKO. All his wins came by TKO or knockout or TKO. He's a good fighter. He's a knockout artist. The reason being, he was promoted to top 5 very soon. That's what I feel. Like with the likes of Gustafsson and Anthony Johnson, they are the top notch fighters. So I thought that he was promoted to that level very early. I think it should have been a step at a time, and then he should have proceeded with that. But I didn't expected this that OSC would get knocked out in the second round.
Yeah, neither did I. I thought he was going to give much more of a fight, especially coming off of the John Jones fight where he lasted
Right.
the whole fight. He went the distance. So
Yeah, and one more thing that his shoulder was dislocated in the first round
yeah,
when he fought John Jones.
yeah.
So I didn't expect, and he looked very tired in going into the second round. I didn't know that he had some issues with the camp or he had some issues cutting the weight. There would be something going into this fight because he never looked this much tired in any
Yeah,
fight.
he suddenly seemed out of it all of a sudden.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
and of course his style is always, his hands are usually down, which, leaves him open to those hits. But he has a very, non-conformist kind of style. He can hit you at any angle. You never know how he's going to hit because he doesn't have a set kind of, style or working. And we saw that today as well.
Right, right. He has very orthodox kind of fighting style. You can say like, he sits with a different angle and he has
You
that
mean unorthodox?
Yeah, unorthodox.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, southpaw. He fights southpaw, but I mean, it's like he cuts very different angles.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to hit OSC.
Yeah.
And he has that knockout power in his left hand. But it seems that there were some issues going into this fight. I'm not sure. But I thought that it would be a good fight. But hats off to Jimmy Manuwa. He fought really well. He looked very good in this fight.
Yeah, I thought Vince would have a stronger chin than he showed in the second round. But I think, there was a kidney kick which Jimmy Manuwa got, which I think caused him a lot of discomfort. And I think he was having problems breathing after that, which is why he suddenly seemed out of the fight all of a sudden.
Right, and Manuwa was hitting body shots again and again. If you recall the second round,
yeah,
he was hitting the body shots, in the liver shots,
correct.
with the punches. So he hit him
punches,
also right.
Yeah,
and then I think then first he hit the right, and then when he got up and he then hit the left hook.
Yeah,
to
the left hook is what finished him off.
Right.
And
so,
I think when Vince went down after the left hook, he went down after him with an elbow, but the elbow missed.
Elbow miss, right.
But of course, Vince was still out, and the referee called the fight off at that time.
Yes, it was lights out. The moment he hit the left hand, it was lights out. It was a right call by the ref.
Yeah.
To stop the fight.
So I think Jimmy again with this win is back in contention. Amongst the top light heavyweights, which of course is a stacked card with Daniel Cormier fighting Anthony Johnson again for the belt, and still no info on when John Jones is going to make a comeback. Alexander Gustafsson, of course, still one of the top guys, and Jimmy Manuwa putting his name up there as well again.
Yeah, right. But I don't see there is a good fight happening between Misha and Nikita Krylov. I think in 2006. I'm sorry, 206 or 207.
Misha.
So Misha, Krylov and Nikita Krylov.
Okay.
So they are the live, and whosoever wins that fight should fight Jimmy Manuwa.
Yeah.
Because both of them are on a winning streak. So I think that would be a good matchup for Jimmy Manuwa.
Great. So that was the main card, UFC 204 today. Now, like we just mentioned with Ratish, we're really excited for a lot of the fights coming up. There's a break, of course, now up till November 5th because of the
Manila card being
Manila
cancelled.
card being either cancelled or rescheduled. As of now, it's not happening. So there is a break now. But the next fight, of course, Dos Anjos versus Ferguson. We're really excited about that. We think that's a really exciting matchup. And of course, the New York card, UFC 205, is going to be amazing. Everything, including the prelims and the main fight card. Amazing fights. One of the best, if not the best fight card up till date put together ever.
Absolutely. It is the best card ever that I have seen. It is the best. You can imagine the fighters like Frankie Edgar, who only main event, he's fighting at the prelims.
Prelims, yeah, of course.
He's fighting at the prelims.
Yeah.
And the likes of Khabib, he's fighting at prelims.
Yeah.
So now you can imagine how big the card is.
Yeah. A huge, huge card. And it's something we're really looking forward to. Of course, we wish we were there, watching that fight. What an amazing fight to take place at the Madison Square Garden. These are the fights we are looking forward to. Coming back to UFC 204, a great night of events for us in India, a great morning of fights. Of course, we wake up early here to catch the fights, and it was worth it watching all these great fights. That is it for today. Thank you, Taman Preet, for joining us again.
One more thing. One more thing. I just want to say it's rumored that GSP will face Anderson Silva at 206. It's being rumored. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of rumors going around about GSP. Let's wait for an official announcement, because Gigard also called out Anderson Silva today. Anderson Silva versus GSP, of course, would be a great comeback match for GSP. It would be a great, almost, it would be a super fight. Let's see what gets announced. There's been a lot of smoke and covers by the UFC and Dana White saying something and something else happening. So, let's see what gets announced.
Yeah, it would be announced this week. GSP said that he'll announce the news, whatever the news is, this week. So let's see. Let's hope for the best he comes back.
Great. Let's hope for that fight happening. And with that, thank you, Taman Preet, for joining us on the Fan Corner. Our number one fan, Taman Preet Singh. It has been a great morning of fights here in India. And with that, we thank you for joining us once again on the MMA India Show. Thank you and goodbye.